Lucheng cannot stop the hamster. Never could, never will.
Hey guys, this is Shroomy, Mushroom, Shroomathin, Shrooms, Mushroomy. I have a lot of different names, and I just really like lore. So, this time, I wanted to focus on the faction series once again, and focus on a faction that has known a lot more than the last one. With Lucheng, the story goes back much farther and has roots in many different stories, so it's important to talk about. And I'll explain it as much as I can, and everything about the faction and its story in the Overwatch world. And also, talk about each character connected to the faction. We have quite a bit on the roster, so we have a lot to talk about. And we'll also be going over how each hero feels about the faction, and just their general story with them. So, let's get into it with the faction's origins. But, before we start, I want to point out that much of the timeline of events is uncertain, but I've tried to separate them into an easy-to-understand format. If you think I forgot something, I'll probably be mentioning it later. So, let's get started. So, what is Lucheng Interstellar? The faction has existed a lot longer than most, with its origins being before the Omnic Crisis. The company, as far as we can tell, has always been focused on advancements in spacefaring technology involving colonies on other planets, space stations, and interstellar travel. A point to mention as well is how Lucheng even worked with other companies, as mentioned in Overwatch Declassified, to meet these goals. One of the companies mentioned here was Wankai Industries, where Lucheng worked to create hydroponic systems for their extraterrestrial bases with them. The first case of these space-related explorations we heard of in-game was Horizon Lunar Colony, the map on the moon. This place is very important to multiple storylines and characters, and continues on to this day as an evolving plot point. However, for now, let's focus on Lucheng and get into everything with the colony, later. The colony was created by Lucheng to not only expand humanity to the stars, but seemingly was also to be their own experimentation and testing ground for many secret ideas. Not only was animal experimentation here, but research in botanical and plants, as well as medical-related cures and advancements for the human body. This base was an overwhelming success, and Lucheng aimed to continue this success with an attempt at another base on Mars. This is when the crisis happens. Lucheng seemed to halt for a time, as the entire world's focus turned to the crisis. With the world in the middle of war, the governments of the world denied Lucheng's request to build a base on Mars. However, while it seemed like Lucheng was focused on helping the world, they continued their plans. The Mars project, called Project Red Promise, was among them, and began to find the staff needed for the base. As the crisis waged on, Lucheng continued its work in the background. When the crisis eventually reached its end, they had already had many plans in motion, not to mention the moon colony base being untouched by the crisis as well. Speaking of the colony, it suddenly went dark. Lucheng immediately sent response teams to try and check the colony to see what was wrong, with each group going missing one by one. They spent many resources trying to figure out what happened in the colony. After many teams were sent, they started to realize what had happened. The guerrillas rebelled, and the death of the entire team on the colony. Lucheng, after spending so much time on the base, considered it a failure and abandoned the project, giving up on trying to take the base back. A statement was made to the public about the base's accident. While we aren't sure what Lucheng said here exactly, we can assume they told the public the base had an accident or a freak malfunction, causing them to lose connection with the base. Around this time, Project Red Promise, the Mars Initiative, was also underway in secret. With one base in disarray and another just getting started, the company was busy trying to maintain a clean public image. Years after the moon colony uprising, Lucheng revealed to the public many of the logs, communications, and some footage of the base that was able to be accessed. In this, the image was painted to the public that the apes seemingly rebelled, with the logs telling a story of the scientists on the base being lured to an external base port and launched off into space. This news brought the colony back into the public's eye. As for the state of Project Red Promise, after the colony went dark, Lucheng, for unknown reasons, shut off all communication with the Mars colony. This confused everyone, as the secret colony was thriving. The scientists, now stuck on Mars, tried to get a message back out to Lucheng, but never succeeded. The people of the colony rationed what they could, as without Lucheng, they lost a crucial source of resources coming from Earth. Since the project was secret, no one outside the company knew they were on Mars, so the colonists began to prepare and plan. All the while, Lucheng moved on. They continue to this day to do the various acts all in secret, and their current goals are unknown. Now, As for the in-present-day storyline focusing on No Selector's invasion, we learn about what's happening with Lucheng in the short story Thoughtless Gods. At Lijiang Tower, China, the city around it is being invaded by Null Sector and taken over. In response, Lijiang is scrapping all data and evacuating the city, as many already have. However, some data cannot be discarded and cannot fall into the wrong hands. A small group is left behind at the base to secure and protect this data. As for what this data is, or why it must be protected, it is unknown. Aside from this, Lucheng during the invasion seems to be doing what everyone else is, evacuating. But with Lucheng, you can never be sure of what you see on the surface. Another thing to point out is in the short story, Lucheng is still monitoring the lunar base, but we will talk more about that later. With that, that's all the background faction information on Lucheng. However, we have a few characters tied to the faction who should be mentioned and focus on as well. Before getting into heroes, let's go over the key figures both in lore and on the in-game roster to mention. Alongside the test subjects of the base, the lunar colony had multiple key named figures, such as Dr. Harold Winston, Dr. Zhang, Flores, Nevsky, Nugent, Patel, Yoshida, and most importantly, Dr. Chow. We will discuss Dr. Chow later in Hammond's segment. As for the character, is essential for his story and in the present day. As for the Mars base, we know of multiple characters here as well. Aside from Juno, we have her parents, Jiayi, a close friend of Mei's, and her father, Kiam Min, as well as many other unnamed colonists that were part of the scientist team. With these characters mentioned, let's now turn our attention to what most are here for, the heroes and their connections to Lucheng, starting with everyone's favorite space ape, Winston. For Winston, his connections to Lucheng are best of a bad scenario. In some ways, every bad thing that could have happened was avoided, and Winston was the best of the lunar colony animals. He was a prized experiment by Lucheng as well. From a young age, a stark difference was made in Winston's growth compared to the other animals. He showed better learning and growth, and was taken under the wing of Dr. Harold Winston, who taught Winston science, but also showed him kindness and told stories of humanity, making Winston aspire to want to visit Earth. Because of being taken care of, specifically by Harold, he was kept isolated most of the time from the other, more violent specimens, with few other animals being seen as Winston's true friends. One such animal is Hypatia, another specimen on the colony, as well, the only evolved hamster of the colony, Hammond. He was close friends with Winston in his youth. As the years went on, Winston lived a nice and peaceful life, but everything changed when the rebellion happened. The apes rose, with Winston not being told of the plan, and the scientists were launched into space. When this happened, Winston began his plan to leave the colony. He and Hammond had spent nights together, creating and scheming schematics for a ship off the colony, and now was his chance. He built his small makeshift ship and launched it off to Earth. Unknown to him, a small straggler was latched on. When he landed, he crashed into the ocean. He was found by Overwatch, which, around this time, was in its prime, right after the crisis. Winston's arrival caused a stir, both in Overwatch and across the globe. Not only was he a gorilla from the moon, but he was sentient. What did this mean? And as such, Lucheng announced that Winston, or Specimen 28 to them, was their property and wanted him back. In response, Overwatch saw Winston as not only useful, but a valuable ally, and therefore took Lucheng to court to fight for Winston. In the end, Overwatch won, and Winston was deemed to have the basic rights of any human or omnic. From here, Winston remained with Overwatch, eventually becoming a full-fledged member, and becoming close friends with another recruit of the time, Lena Oxton, aka Tracer. The two became a close duo, with Winston even helping her with her time anomalies, keeping her safe. As Overwatch grew, Winston became an integral part of the organization, seeing it as his home away from home. When Overwatch fell, he stuck to his idea of a hopeful and bright organization, and lived in the old watch point, until, one day, recalling the heroes before the story fully kicked off. There is so much more to Winston, but this is mainly his connection to Lucheng, so I'll leave it at that. Super neat stuff that we learned from Overwatch to Classified in there. But, now the opposite of Winston, how did Hammond's connection with Lucheng go? Hammond's story is best explained in his new short story, available on the Blizzard website, Thoughtless Gods. He was one of many hamsters experimented on at the colony. He was the only one of these projects, by some miracle, to survive. He remembers his past greatly, how lonely he felt being taken from all the others, and how isolated his world became, being the only evolved hamster. Aside from his forced evolution, his body was also forced to grow and change, making him feel like a monster. Hammond would always find some way out of his room on the colony, sneaking around in the vents of the base. This is how he met Winston, and the two became close friends. Hammond even saw him as a best friend. They dreamed of leaving the base together, and when the uprising happened, Hammond went to find Winston, only to see him building the ship they had dreamed of, getting ready to leave without him. This shattered Hammond, and created a tear between the two that is still yet to be mended. He snuck aboard Winston's ship, creating a small secondary pod, and hitched a ride to Earth. He landed in Australia and created a mech through the arena of the Junker Town. He lives here to this day, a friend to the Junker Queen, and an ally to the only place he even feels somewhat okay in. Hammond's story continued when he snuck into Lucheng, attempting to get some experimental parts for a project back in Junkertown. Here, he came face to face with Dr. Chow, the lead and only survivor of the lunar colony. Lucheng still views Hammond as their experiment, and while they no longer get Winston because they had lost him in court, they want Hammond. Because of the frequent visits to the colony, Dr. Chow now has to use a wheelchair thanks to their bone density and due to the changes of Earth and Moon gravity. You can see this in-game on the map. It's a pretty neat detail. It was added a couple years back. The two met, Hammond and Dr. Chow, with Hammond having to face his creator. In this, we learn the colony on the moon has changed, with the apes building some more of the base. As well, Lucheng continues to monitor the base. Hammond, feeling not sympathy, but an odd kinship to the apes of the moon, sends them one message before escaping Lucheng. You're being watched. With that, Hammond escapes the base, and Dr. Chow, and returns to the Outback, the tech he wanted in his mech. And that is Hammond's story so far. Very obviously, it's abbreviated to just focus on the Lucheng portion, but yes, Hammond despises this company, and I highly recommend reading Thoughtless Gods. It is my favorite story from Heroes of Senate. Next up, a hero with a mostly unknown connection to most, Sigma. It's not touched on much, but Sigma was doing his research on a Lucheng Interstellar space station when his accident happened, and the company kept him in their custody after his accident, until his eventual rescue, if you could call it that, by Talon. Sigma is now with Talon, but Lucheng even allowing him to do this research on a base is very interesting. You can learn more about this rescue in Reaper's story Code of Violence. While not the main focus of the story, I think it's a very interesting background detail you can pick up on and look at when you read the story. Another small interesting detail in Sigma, and this is more of a fun fact, know those floating hover cars on most maps? You can see them on any city map. Well, Sigma made that technology, so Lucheng probably had a hand in that as well. And it probably goes in hand with Lucheng's ideas in general, such as how they focus on gravity and interstellar space travel, and Sigma's technology seemed to focus on, gravity, hovering, that kind of stuff. So it kind of goes in hand with that. A small update. As of recording this, we actually learned some new information on Sigma's technology. We learned that Sigma also created the tech inside of Freya's cape. We find out through a voice line that is in-game now. I'll go ahead and play it here.
That cape. It utilizes maglev technology, yes?
That's right. Good eye.
Ah, there is no greater joy than to see one's invention help the world.
Sure. Just don't worry about what I'm using it for.
Lastly, the most recent Lucheng addition to the roster is Juno. Juno's interesting because she grew up on the Mars colony, but also seems to have little connection to Lucheng itself. She grew up on the colony her whole life, and the scientists there even making her a suit, and all of them treated her like family. As the years went on, the colonists knew they wouldn't be able to last on Mars forever, since Lucheng had cut them off for without reason, so they decided they could only get one person to Earth. They chose Juno, and spent their resources trying to not only give Juno a chance at life on Earth, but also to try and find a way to help everyone. She was blasted off to Earth, where her story picked up in some of the voice lines and interactions. On Dorado, her pod landed, where she wandered for some time. Overwatch was able to get her, and hearing her distress call, brought her back and her pod back to Watchpoint Gibraltar. Here, Juno met with May, who was a good friend and colleague of her mother's. The two started to try and find a way to save the colonists trapped on Mars. On a more speculative note for a moment, it's implied through Freya's release and interactions that Lucheng has a bounty on Juno. This would make some sense, since the Mars colony was supposedly a secret. Besides this, Lucheng remains a mystery to Juno's story as well. So, as is becoming the trend with these, we're going to do a small summary segment, just talking about everything we talked about already, and then go into a speculative segment with my thoughts, headcanons, and theories. So, with that, that's all the heroes and the base summary of the faction done. Of course, if you're interested in hearing more of the nitty-gritty, I highly recommend reading Overwatch Declassified, Thoughtless Gods, and Code of Violence. All of these are great, and Thoughtless Gods and Code of Violence are on the Blizzard website. It was updated recently to be much more cohesive and easy to read. So, overall, Lucheng is not the best company. They're extremely shady in the Overwatch world. They've done some nefarious things, but they've also done some good, and it is not... I'm not sure if it's supposed to be good for the world or good for themselves. I'm just going to jump right into my thoughts and speculation on Lucheng. This is going to be more rambly than the other segments, so I apologize. But I think Lucheng is one of the oldest factions in the game, and is one that has desperately needed some kind of character to represent them for a long time in-game. We have a lot of characters in lore that it could be, from Dr. Chow to another ape on the colony. It could also be, shout out to the Harold Winston fans out there. Could be Harold Winston. There's a lot of different avenues and a lot of characters that could represent the faction, and I do think we need someone still. I thought Juno was going to be this, but obviously she did not turn out to be that cocky kind of pilot astronaut we got at BlizzCon. She's a lot more bubbly and happy, and personality-wise, just a lot nicer. So I would love to see someone who genuinely believes in the company or is high up in the company to be a hero one day. I think that would help it greatly. As for maps, I would love for characters to comment on Lijiang Tower more, and also to just get the Horizon map back in the game somehow through some way. Probably not Clash, but some way, just like Paris, but obviously with more lore to it. And I really like the world building they do with Lucheng through the characters. Once again, I highly recommend reading Overwatch Declassified. Yeah, personally, it's my favorite thing to come out of Overwatch in a long time, Overwatch Declassified. And I highly recommend everyone pick it up and read it. It's very good. Please read it, as well as Heroes Ascendant. But you can read those stories on the website, except for the Ash one. But that's not here. So, anyways, that's pretty much all I have to say on Lucheng. I would love to hear how other people feel about the company. Personally, I think they need more representation in game. I don't think we get enough of them, as with a lot of the lore companies and factions of the Overwatch world. So, yeah, that's going to be all from me. I hope you guys enjoyed this a bit longer kind of rambles and speculation, as well as facts about Lucheng. Please let me know what faction you'd like to hear about next, if you like this type of video, and what you think I could do better with in the future. I'm always open to getting better at this. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys next time. Bye!